are on episode 8, and today's episode title is Living with Eternity Perspective. Our theme is learning to live, lead, and make decisions with eternity in mind, instead of only focusing on temporary outcomes. Welcome to Live Courageous podcast, where we explore faith, leadership, healing, and the courage it takes to become who God has created you to be. I am your host, Musudeen, and each week we have honest conversations about life, growth, and walking by faith, even when the path is unclear. Whether you're navigating change, searching for purpose, or learning to trust God in new seasons, this space here is for you. To encourage you, to challenge you, and to remind you that courage is something that we build every day. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's step into today's conversation. We have a guest today. He's dear to me. This is my son, Dr. Damon Harrell. And we'd like to welcome him today to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yes, he's a doctor of physical therapy. So if you have any questions, you can hit him up afterwards. No.
Maybe 4 feet.
Anyhow. So today we're in our final episode in the Walking Courageously series. And honestly, I think a lot of people chase things after they never stop long enough to question. So more success, they look for more money, more recognition, more visibility, and more attention. But eventually you reach a point where you start asking deeper questions. And that's why we're going to talk about eternity here. So we ask sometimes ourselves, what am I actually building? Or who am I becoming? You know, what in my life is actually going to really matter in the long term? Because if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of people are building lives that look like successful online, like the social medias. And sometimes, even though it is public, it's really exhausting because we're trying to prove to someone or some people what sometimes we're really not. So it makes us feel empty. So I've realized that just because sometimes we feel like it's urgent, it doesn't mean that it's important. And we talk about that sometimes. You'll say, Mama, it's not urgent. Put it out, you know. So we'll talk more about that. So today's conversation is about living with eternity perspective. It's not just something we build quickly, but it's something we have to build wisely every single day. What if the life you're building looks like successful on this earth, but it's empty when you go to eternity? Something to think about, right? So why do people chase temporary things? And sometimes I believe that they have big struggles because they're constantly pulling towards what's visible. You know, we have to make sure people are seeing us. We have to have the most likes on social media, and we just praise those things. We got 1 million followers. We're just ecstatic, you know. The world rewards attention. So naturally, people start chasing these things so they can look impressive, right? Without even stopping to ask if those things are actually meaningful. And honestly, it's easy to drift into that mindset. So we will start usually measuring our values by our productivity. We have to do the most in the day, get everything done. I'm a prime example of that. My son probably can attest to that. Attention, you know, we want to seek attention from other people or just the applause, you know, great job, recognition also. Or even achievement. We feel like we have achieved the world when we get things done in a timely manner. But instead of, we need to seek peace, integrity, faithfulness, and alignment. And I think why so many people are burnt out is because they're trying to like master this image instead of building a meaningful life. Not everything demands your attention quickly because, again, this is a longevity that we're looking at. So, Damon, I want to ask you right now for our eternity question that we know we're Christ followers. So, my son's probably going to spend some of that. How do you see how we view eternity from here?
I think it's based off of two questions. Everything we do is based off of two questions that we operate in, whether we realize it or not. Who's our God and what's the point? Mm-hmm. You went back to social media. If your God is the attention of other people, then your point would be to garner as much of that attention as possible. If you're a believer, but you're not focused, because our walk requires intentionality and focus, you can kind of forget who my God is and what's the point. And I think that's why idolatry is so easy to fall into or to slip into. So when we lose focus on who our God is and what's our point. So when we're just drifting, when we're not paying attention, when we're not seeking first the kingdom of God on a daily basis, we're going to naturally drift. I was just realizing if you simplify the whole point of our walk, the whole gist of the Bible, it's God meeting us in our humanity. So if we're not focused on the God over here, we're going to slip into our humanity. So that's about the path of righteousness being narrow. So it's so easy to go the wide route when you're not paying attention. So I think that's where the eternal purpose really comes from. It requires our attention, and without it, you're going to drift into, the things of this world by our flesh nature.
So it sounds like we have to stay focused on what our true value is, right? It comes down to what we really value. So you're saying if we value the world, we're gonna more drift towards that, versus if we value God's value, we're going to seek more of His so we can have that eternal perspective. Okay, that's well said. Okay. Okay. So do you think culture has confused visibility with value?
Visibility with value. I think it depends on, kind of going back to that first point of who your God is. So if your God is fame or being seen or being acknowledged by your peers, then you will confuse visibility as value. So often, just with social media, you see people posting their highlights to get as many likes as possible, and you have to ask yourself, why am I doing that? There's different reasons, but sometimes that reason could be, I want my life to be visible. I want it to seem like I have a lot of value and that I'm doing well. So it could be performative. It just goes back to the first two questions: who your God is and what's the point. A vacation picture could just be a vacation picture, or it could be a cry for acknowledgement. You just wanted to be seen and acknowledged by your peers. So everything comes back to those two questions, like on a daily basis.
And there's a cost that comes with that. It depends where you're looking at things, because if we're trying to appease other people, we're mentally drained. I would think so anyway, but maybe not everybody think like I do either. So when we try to put our value in people, and that's where it goes, that people pleasing thing, I think, again, because I need to be at this high expectations for the public. You have your private side and two different things, and so the eternity part, I believe, is really, people need to look at. But we're going to dive more into that eternity part, because again, we're here to give value to people so they can take this information and apply it on the daily, and it's not a one and done, it's an ongoing type thing. So that was really a good perspective on all that. So because again, we think of, we go Christian ways, because sometimes if you give that information and say, what is your eternal value, we as Christians will go, well, we know we want to be in heaven with Christ, right? And so we're looking now here on planet Earth, because we're still here, And even though there's two things that really matter is people's lives and of course seeking the kingdom. And that's what Christ also talks about is, taking care of his sheep here. And of course, he is the main first, and then his sheep, which is the children of God. So that's really good, perspective to go that way too. So one of the things I think about when we orchestrate eternal purpose, and you probably have had some internal thoughts about this, because again, David's been doing this walk for a long time. And usually for a new person, okay, never thought of eternal life or even eternal living, what type of information you'll give a beginner to start with?
Keep it simple. I just had a conversation with two individuals last week. If you're going to boil it down to the Bible, you can go as simple as possible, and it's going to tell the whole gospel. You can go as complicated as possible. Keeping it simple is just about relationships. So I often tell people, usually people have at least a parent in their life. Just like a relationship with your parent. Sometimes you can just be in their presence and your relationship is building. I'm sure you can speak to this as a mother, but you can appreciate when I'm just sitting on the couch next to you. Nothing about our walk is based off the things that we do, but because of who he says we are, we can just exist, and then everything else kind of flows off of that. Because I can just exist and just be who he made me to be, I don't have to look to do anything that's going to come naturally, because I'm more focused on the relationship than I am with doing steps.
Okay. So it's relationship building.
Right. Okay. Just to keep it simple. Humans, we know relationship, with one another, and I think that's something everyone can relate to. For sure. Relationship building and what that looks like.
Yeah. Some of us got to work harder at it than others. Yeah. It's okay. This is why they're here, okay, to learn this stuff. Good. So again, a lot of people feel trapped, okay, especially because they don't know how to choose intentionally. So what you were saying, it sounds like if they are focused on what that thing is, whatever that eternal value is, they will be able to intentionally work towards that. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, this is for anyone, believer or non-believer, if you lift out what's most important to you or the things you feel responsible for, and then you put that in an order list, so let's say I'm you and my order is, okay, God is the most important, then being a mom, and then being a service to others. Then when you go throughout your day, you'll structure it like that. So if something is getting, let's say you got your God time out the way, if you're getting home at 6-7 p.m. and you're like, okay, do my clients and individuals need me, or does my family need me? And you have this order of operations. I don't care what's going on with number 3. Number 2 is more important. So number 3 goes on the back burner because I listed out my order of operations of what I am responsible for. So if you list out the things that are most important to you, when you have those conflicts where you have 2 things going on at once, it's so easy to know which one to choose. 1 hasn't been taken care of, so I definitely can't do 2. 2 hasn't been taken care of, so I definitely cannot do 3. And then it just helps you live a life of order. That's what Christ is. He's a God of order. So when you structure your life and you're intentional about your order and what's important to you, everything else is just so simple. It feels chaotic when you're going out of order, and your body feels it a lot faster than your mind feels it. You feel pulled in 10 directions, but you're like, why is that? Because my order is off. I'm not operating in what I actually deem to be important to me.
This is a life lesson right here, because my son teaches me a lot of stuff. So we had a situation, he's speaking to his mother here just last week. And I stayed in the car to, finish my conversation, which I thought was being helpful to the individuals. They needed a place to stay. And my son met me in the car and he says, "What are you doing? It's nighttime. You need to come on in the house." And I said, "Well, just give me 1 second. Let me finish this conversation." And I'm just trying to connect someone that's homeless to a housing situation. My son said, "Does this have to be done tonight?" And so he took my phone, you guys, and he threw my phone phone on the bed. I was like, wait a minute, let me finish the conversation with the people I was talking to. So he made me get off the phone. This is real stuff. And he says, your priority is now at home. So this is real. You know what he's saying? This is wisdom here. And I've learned a lot. I learned from my children, you know, so it's my grown children. It's pretty phenomenal. So thank you for that, Damon.
Yeah, I feel like it's a lesson that a lot of people need. I had a friend back in Arkansas, and he just felt, he had a new baby, married, he just felt stretched too thin. I told him, if you do nothing else in life but be a good father and a great husband, that's enough. What people don't realize is family is multiplier. So if you did nothing in life but be a good mother, you have 3 children, and you raise us up well, and we go out and we impact the world and impact thousands of people, indirectly, you impacted thousands of people because your goal was to be a great mother. So being a great mother and a great wife is enough. People seeing that bondage, that bond and that unity is enough, because ultimately God works from the inside out. If your marriage is in shambles, but you're doing all these great works on the outside, you think God's like, oh, well done, you're doing. No. If your family's in shambles, but everything else, and I'm serving, you think God's like, what? No, inside out. So it goes back to that order of, okay, let's see, for myself, you know, ultimately what I strive when I have my own family is I want to be a good child of God first, in terms of my relations, a great husband second, a great father, and then everything else will play off of that. And if that's becoming too much, the stuff on the outside, I'm going back in and knowing that that's enough. So just knowing that, you know, your fulfillment comes from inside out, you know, with God, and then your household, and then anything outside of that, you know, anything outside of your home that's getting attention, it has to be, it can't be, you know, a destruction of whatever else is going on your list. Your 3 can't come before your 2. Your 2 can't come before your 1.
Wow. Okay. Very powerful. I really take that to heart. Yeah. And because sometimes we can look successful, what you're saying, on the outside, but feel lost on the inside, right? Because we have no order or structure, like you're telling your mother. And so that's really appreciative, you know. And usually when you have that structure, that's where that peace comes in, right? And so you able to sit in the silence. This is another thing that Damon's also taught me recently. To sit for 10 minutes, you guys, and not do anything. I thought, my goodness, but it's very, very possible where you just have your mind clear. And so it's actually refreshing, by the way, you know. But again, our success, we think of success, the world thinks of success as having and doing and doing and doing and doing and not saying no to anything. But that's not really what success is. Recently, I learned that. And I'm going to ask you that question too, Damon. How do you see success currently in your life? Because now he has a new chapter he's starting. So tell me all about that.
I think success is a daily thing. You ask a lot of people, what do you need to be successful? And it's always something in the future. And the next question I ask them is, if you died today, was your life a failure because you didn't reach this point? And it really changed your mindset, because for me, it's an everyday thing, kind of going back to that order. What's most important? Did I spend my time with God? Did I become closer to Him? Was I a good son? Did I love someone today? At the end, yeah, I did. Okay, today was successful. If I do nothing else today, I can deem my life as a success, because it's not goal oriented, it's not future oriented, but it's something that can be achieved daily. And I think that's where you find your satisfaction. And of course, you can still have your goals and whatnot, but don't deem your value and success, or your measure of success, based off of future goals, because honestly, you can slip into arrogance. Like, oh, in 10 years, you don't know if you're going to have the next breath, you know? You don't know if you're going to have tomorrow to wake up to, and that's not up to you. So even that is an acknowledgement of a holy God that's giving you the grace to even make it 10 years to do whatever you set that goal to be. So it's just changing your standard of what you call success.
That's a really good point, because people, when they feel like they're not moving in life, they don't feel successful. But I like that analogy because it's a daily thing. It's not a long-term goal, it's a right now goal, right? I like that because that puts our mindset differently. You know, it changes perspective in terms of, as long as I accomplish, like you said, loving someone today, that's successful. But we have to identify those things, I think, to know we really hit the line today. We got that line, we drew the line, and then we crossed that line just today. Wow, that's pretty powerful, Damon. Okay, I like that. Okay, you guys hear that? He's giving us some great value here. So we're gonna go back to the eternal perspective, okay? And you do a lot of mentoring with people. You know, you started Barbershop Talk and in Des Moines, Iowa, and that was successful because it's still going on. And I know you kind of did some installation of bigger picture, like eternal, because I know I just know that because I know him. So can you tell me a little bit how you started that program, and what your thought process was in that program?
Yeah, so honestly, I would say that was a gift from God because at that time, it was like right after COVID or during COVID, and a lot of isolation in general. And then I noticed on my college campus that the success of women was being highlighted, which, you know, that's a great thing. But the men were kind of being left behind and left out. So the events were geared towards women, and none towards men. And just me knowing godly order and what God calls men to be in terms of leaders and seeing and making an impact. It's like, we're not doing this, there's nothing being geared towards us. And it kind of felt isolating and lonely. So I was an RA. My friend Parfait was also an RA, and friend Dan was also on campus, and just connected with them and said, you know, let's start something. I was a part of this board, Coalition of Black Students, and we did the event once, but seeing how many men showed up, I was like, oh no, we got to keep this going. So something that we officially started having, and I was just very intentional in terms of, like, if I was walking and I saw another black man, hey, I need you there. Because often, if you want to get someone to go somewhere or feel value, talk to them directly. You can send out a flyer and whatnot, but they need to know, no, this event's for you. I need to see you there. You know, just for us to talk and we can grow together. Men, we can grow in fellowship of, you know, other men, but it just takes that intentionality, because I think normally or naturally we might be geared towards isolation. I can do this by myself. I'm strong, but you know, we need one another. So just, yeah, that's how that got started. And you know, it's God's baby, so it's still continuing on. I still hear from them. Sometimes they ask me questions on what to be asking, and you know, up until I think this current year, I was going down even after I graduated to see how I was going and seeing God grow it, honestly. And that's just my perspective on a lot of things. I view it as certain things are God's jobs and certain things are my job. So in terms of its growth and development, that's God's job. My job was just to be obedient and starting it and reaching out and speaking to people. And then after that, let him do the rest. And I don't worry about it, I don't stress about it, because God, that's your job. And I can hold you to that.
Yes, that's important. That is important when we totally relinquish everything to God. And I like that story because it reminds me of an eternal perspective a different way. So in 2023, you know, right after, you know, grandmother passed, I went up to Colorado, right? But this is interesting, guys, because I was going to do a spiritual retreat, and I was looking for something, you know, voided in my heart, just down, you know, like depressed down or whatever that situation is. But I didn't say I was depressed, by the way. So I needed something. I needed an answer from God, and Damon already knows this story. But the story is, I wanted to go to a warm area in April, right? I wanted to go to Phoenix or somewhere warm and go up to the mountains. Well, God had a sense of humor. Phoenix tickets were like $500 to go for a weekend. I was like, oh no, I'm not paying that. So I went to Denver because it was $150. So going to Denver, thinking it's going to be warm, it was probably 30 degrees. It was snowing. Oh my goodness. So we get there, it's snow. We go to the mountains. Your sister, my daughter, we went up there to the mountains. We sat there with my Bible, and I'm reading, and the snow's pouring down on us, And my daughter, she was so patient. And it was a no phone weekend. So I didn't have my phone turned on, but Aziza had her phone turned on. And so we're up in the mountains, shivering and praying at the same time. It was just really cool, though. And eventually, because I was praying for a breakthrough, there was a lot of stuff going on, from mom passing, business issues, personal issues. Everything was at the same time. There's nothing that was like this day and then 3 weeks later no, it would happen all in the same week. Oh my goodness. And you're like, okay, which way am I going now? And so it was a great time being in the mountains and praying. And the scripture that came was 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7, when Paul is talking about the thorn in your side. He had a thorn in his side, in his flesh. And at that time I'm thinking, that's me. There's thorns, a lot of thorns in my side, my flesh, And then Paul prayed 3 times for God to take away that thorn, that pain. And God said, no, my grace is sufficient. And so that was a scripture that, I read a lot of scriptures, but that's the one that stuck. And that was the one that I figured oh my goodness, this is what I'm going through. All these thorns in my side all at once, And this is it. But he says, my grace is sufficient through all of that. And so I brought that back to Kansas City because not only I was able to elevate from this, I tell people, I feel like I'm the eagle, the eagle that flies high. And I felt like I was flying high right after that. And I was explaining to people, I said, I don't even know how to explain it to people, but it's like that inner peace, even though everything was chaotic. You talk about being chaotic. Everything was just hitting left and right, back. And then just all of a sudden just have that peace. You're like, shh, no matter what. And then I was able to mentor other women. So it was really cool because I was in a group regeneration. And I was able to help other people along the way, even in this mess. And so when we look at life and we look at a bigger picture, again, that was the temporary right then, but now it's internal. Now this is going to be big, and it was a different perspective, a different lens that I had to see things in. And you're able to help others along the way when you're seeing longer term, long-term stuff. And that's what eternity is, because again, this is not our final home. And we're going to go somewhere. It can either be heaven or hell. So you got to take a pick. But it's really a perspective that I think, just the listeners can hone in on and know, okay, this is what I need to do to change my perspective on that. So that was really good, even your story. So with that said, Damon, you have new things that you're going to do. And I've already prophesied on you, but anyway, we're not going to talk about that. But just the thought of our perspective for eternity. What else can you tell the listeners in terms of how to develop this starting today?
I think a big part of keeping everything simple, recognizing what's God's job and what's mine. Mm-hmm. So with things, places you want to get or places you feel like God's telling you to go, my response is, all right, God, get me there and I'll be obedient, but you have to get me there. Mm-hmm. Or even when something might be hard, like you're going to be doing this, and mm-hmm. I'm like, I don't see it, God, but mm-hmm. if you want me there, you have to get me there, and I'll go and I'll be faithful and I'll be obedient. So just recognizing his job's to get me there, and my job is to be obedient in mm-hmm. whatever steps he asks me to take. So just keeping it simple and just keeping it honest. All right, God, mm-hmm. what are we doing today? Mm-hmm. Where are we going? And if you said something that scares you, God, that scares me. But I trust that your will is better than mine. So you're going to have to get me there. And every time, like, I pray that he does get me there. But you got to be honest. You got to be honest.
Yes.
Like, I'm not going to lie to you. That don't sound like something I want to do. But I know that your will and what you're asking is for the absolute best. So, you get me there. And he always does. And then when you get there, your perspective has changed, and it's no longer something you don't want to do, but something you're glad that you had listened to, because just knowing that his wisdom is infinite and ours is so finite, and we get our wisdom from him. So,
so it takes obedience.
Yeah. It's a daily
Yeah.
submission and daily, okay, identifying what's God's job and what's my job. It's not my job to open doors. It's your job. So just tell me when to walk through. Just keep it, everything can be kept so simple.
Okay. Yes, that's true. Okay. I like that. Many people are building their lives with looking to people to admire them, okay? But not lives, their lives do not have peace, because they're looking for other people's affirmations. And you've talked about different things in terms of God leading you, God telling you, God is going to orchestrate that to happen. And so if the listeners are not believers and don't believe in God, I know it's kind of hard to kind of spin that. Do you have another view for them?
Yes, ask yourself the question, what things in your life has ever fulfilled you to where you were just satisfied?
Okay.
Because I'm going off of, the Bible and our belief system. It says our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. And if that's the purpose of our bodies, you have to think, what can mankind do to light my temple? What can things do to light my temple? And it's nothing. So when you're going throughout looking for other people's affirmations, I just want to ask you the question, has that ever fulfilled you? Has that ever been enough? And then just think, well, why not? Why can't I be satisfied in this one thing? If you posted one picture on Instagram and got 1 million likes, would that be enough for you? Or do you feel like you need to post another one to get recharged? So you just have to ask yourself, like, is the things I'm pursuing satisfying my soul, or is it I get it and then satisfying me for a little bit and then I need more? So just questions to ask yourself internally, and then the question is, no, it's not satisfying me. You have to ask yourself, well, now what? And I trust that in those moments, that's where God will meet them, and that's a his job type of thing.
That's for sure.
And he will.
So again, it's temporal when we look to other people for applause and for a revalidation, because at the end of the day, God has already told us who we are in him. So if we look to him to get the answers, you're going to be fulfilled all the time, not just a one and done, or waiting for the next post, like you said, or the next applause, or emojis. People put the emojis up there, or however. So that's a key point. So for the listeners, we want you to reflect on today's conversation. We want you to see what your eternal perspective look like at this present time. And if it's not anything we talked about, maybe you can find something to glean on and try to evaluate that, because this is a internal evaluation that we have to do, because nobody's going to tell you what your eternal perspective look like, but it's something that you have to sit with and then know what you have to work towards. That's what it sounds like. That's really good. Well, do you have some last wisdom of knowledge to give to people today?
I guess just reiterating, no matter who you are, believer, non-believer, write out what's important to you, order them, live your life based on that order. And it'll help get rid of a lot of the chaos in the daily. When you know your order, when you know what you're about, it's kind of hard for people to pull you in 10 different directions, because people will do it. They will do what you allow them to. So if you don't have your internal order set, your boundaries, what you will and you won't allow, you'll go for anything.
For sure. That's why you can't say yes to everything, huh?
Right. If it doesn't fall in your order,
Learn the power of no.
Other people's urgency is not your urgency.
That's what I'm saying. Some people think like, I need to do it right now. That you're speaking to mama, but yeah.
No, I don't. No.
They've taught me a lot. So no, everything is not a yes, you know, and sometimes we want to say yes because we feel like we're being helpful, but literally we're not really helping much because we're not helping ourselves. And if you can't help yourself, who are you going to help? You know, it's going to be just a downforce, a fall. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I would say be a source, be a resource and not a source.
Not a source.
So when you find yourself, someone keeps going back to you to be the source of anything, it's not my job. I'm a resource. You go to resource me once or twice. Don't keep coming to me. I'm out. Go to the source. I am a resource. And just knowing that. Well, yeah. You don't need me. You need Jesus. Go to him. Now, if he prompts me to help you, I'll help you.
Right.
Once, twice, a couple times, but I can't be your source of anything.
That's good information because us as caregivers, we feel like we are the source and the resources. But you've taught me, you know, Mama, you can't do it all, you know. It used to be a saying that says, let the starfish go. I had to learn that really quick. Let the people go that don't need to be, you know, you hanging on to people and thinking, okay, it's going to get better. They need me. But no, you're hindering more than anything. So I really appreciate that. And Damon, it's been a pleasure you being here today, hanging out with your mom and giving value to our listeners. And again, this is the last episode for this series, but we do have others series that is going to be coming up. And if you have missed any of our series, you can go to YouTube and check us out there. Subscribe to the channel and Facebook. We also have Facebook and also Instagram. Today, we have given value in terms of eternal perspective. And we are so excited you came and joined us today and share this channel with other people. And if you didn't want to reach the doctor, he has a he has a Facebook he has a Facebook page. He's not really out there like that, but yeah. So again, thank you, Dr. Damon Harrell, for being with us today. And we are Live Courageous. We walk by faith.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.